Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another lecture in our series on literary movement and groups in English literature. Today, we are moving forward in literary history and entering the exciting world of Elizabethan drama. And our topic for today is the University Wits. Now, before we begin with the topic, let me quickly tell you what exactly we are going to cover in this lecture so that it is a clear roadmap in your mind. First, we'll understand who the University Wits actually were. Then we'll answer a very interesting question. Why are they called the University Wits? Did they themselves use this name, or was this name, or term given to them later on? After that, we'll briefly understand the Renaissance and Elizabethan background in which these writers flourished. Then, one of the most important section of the examination point of view is that we look at the major characteristics of the university wits. We'll discuss the use of satire, classical allusion, sophisticated language, blank verse, wit, and their exploration of intense human emotions. Now, once we understood the common characteristics, we'll meet the individual writers. We'll see which writers belong to Cambridge, which all are associated with Oxford, and we'll also discuss the interesting case of Thomas Kidd, who is commonly discussed with the university wits, even though he did not even receive a university education. Then we'll finally study the major works and literary contributions. And we'll also discuss the university wits and their influence, rivalry, and literary connection with Shakespeare. So, by the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand not simply who the university wits were, but also why they occupy such an important position between Renaissance and the rise of Shakespearean drama. So, with this roadmap, let's begin with our first question. Who were the university wits? So, the university wits were a group of playwrights, poets, and pamphleteers who flourished towards the end of 16th century, particularly during the Elizabethan period. Now, what connected these writers? One of the most important thing that they had in common was their educational background. Most of them had received their education either at Oxford or University or Cambridge University. And this university education becomes very important when we look at the kind of literature they produced. Remember, we are talking about Renaissance, an age that was characterized by revival of classical Greek and Roman learning. So these writers, therefore, came to literature with considerable knowledge of classical text, mythology, rhetoric, and literary technique. And when we see this education reflected in their writings, their language are often rich, it was elevated and sophisticated. They frequently used classical references, metaphors, similes, imagery, and rhetorical devices. Their writings, therefore, appeared intellectually and artistically refined. But they were not important simply because they were highly educated. Their great significance lies in their contribution to the development of English drama. They experimented with dramatic techniques, poetic language, powerful speeches, intense emotions, and new possibilities of dramatic expression. And most important thing is that they belong to the generation that came immediately before and alongside the early career of William Shakespeare. So when we study the university wits, we are actually studying an important stage in the development of English theatre, the stage that helped prepare the way for Shakespeare. So remember, the university wits were university educated writers of the late 16th century who brought Renaissance learning and literary sophistication to English drama and poetry. Now, there is something very interesting. We call them as group, but were they actually an organized literary group? Did these writers themselves call one another university wits? The answer is no. The name was actually given to them, much later on. So let's understand the next question. Why are they called as university wits? The first thing to remember is that they were not an officially organized literary group. These writers never collectively called themselves the University Wits. The term was actually given to them much later on in the 19th century by a literary critic called as George Saintsbury. So, why did later literary historians place them together? Because when we look at these writers, we find several important similarities. Most of them were associated with either Oxford or Cambridge University. Their university education gave them considerable knowledge of Greek and Latin literature, classical mythology, rhetoric, and Renaissance learning. And this explains the first half of the name, university. The second word is wits. So here, wit does not simply mean humor. It refers to their intellectual ability, the learning, cleverness, and the literary brilliance. So their work, it displayed sophisticated language, classical references, rhetorical skills, and considerable command over literary technique. So the term becomes very easy to understand. University refers to the educational background, while wits, it refers to their intellectual and literary brilliance. And one factual question that you should definitely remember for examination is that who coined the term university wits? The answer is George Saintsbury. So now we know both who the university wits were and why they received this particular name. But to understand why writers like these suddenly became so important towards the end of the 16th century, we need to understand the age in which they were writing, the Renaissance and the Elizabethan age. Let's talk about the Renaissance background. The university wits were essentially products of the Renaissance spirit. Now, what exactly do you understand by the word Renaissance? The Renaissance was the age of rebirth and remarkable cultural growth. There was tremendous development in literature, poetry, paintings, art, science, and learning. But one aspect of Renaissance is particularly important for understanding the university wits, the revival of classical learning. There was renewed interest in the literature and the intellectual tradition of ancient Greece and Rome. And remember, what we have understood by the term university wits, they were all university educated. So their education brought them into direct contact with the classical tradition. They studied classical literature, mythology, rhetoric, different literary techniques, and naturally all of this began to enter their own writings. At the same time, we are also in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. So, Queen Elizabeth's period created a favorable environment in which writers and artists they could express their creativity more freely. This flourishing of literature and the arts is one of the reasons the Elizabethan period came to be celebrated as the golden age of English literature. So, when the university wits began writing, they had a very interesting combination available to them. They had the knowledge of the classical past, but they also had the creative energy of the Renaissance present. So remember, they had the knowledge of the classical past, but they also had the creative energy of Renaissance present, and they brought these two together in English stage. So that is why their plays became more sophisticated in language, richer in literary reference, and increasingly ambitious in their treatment of characters and human emotions. So remember the connection. Renaissance gave them intellectual environment, university education gave them classical learning, and English drama became the field in which they experimented. So, this is the background from which the university wits emerge. Now, that we understood the age, we can move to another important part of the topic. That is, what are the major characteristics of university wits? The first important characteristic is their use of satire. Satire is a literary technique through which a writer exposes the faults and weakness of individuals or society using wit, humor, irony, or criticism. The University Wits frequently used satire to comment on contemporary society, particularly problems such as vanity, hypocrisy, extravagance. So, satire was not simply used to make the audience laugh. Behind the humor, there was often a serious social or moral criticism. The next characteristic is the extensive use of classical allusion. Remember, these writers were university educated. They had considerable knowledge of Greek and Roman literature, mythology, history, and legends. So, naturally, their learning entered their literary works. Their plays, therefore, contains reference of classical gods, legendary heroes, myths, and historical figures. And what exactly do we understand by the term allusion? An allusion is a brief, indirect reference to a well known person, place, event, work, or biblical story that meant to add a rich layer of meanings. For example, such as greedy person, that is said to be as Scrooge in Dickens' Christmas Carol. Then, when we see fatal weakness in Achilles' heel, it refers to the Greek mythology. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, it also features a heavy historical and cultural allusion ranging from Dante's Inferno to World War I events, symbolizing the fragmentation and modern civilization. The third important characteristic is their sophisticated language. These writers did not generally restrict themselves to simple, controversial English. Their language could be elevated, ornate, poetic, and simply rhetorical. They made extensive use of literary devices such as metaphors, similes, imagery, paradoxes, and classical allusion. And why was their language so grand? Because many of their plays dealt with equally grand subjects. Kings, queens, nobles, heroes, romance, mythology, political struggles. So the grandeur of the subject was often matched by the grandeur of their language. The fourth characteristic is the long and the eloquent speeches. The university wits were famous for giving their characters long, powerful speeches filled with rhetorical flourishes and poetic expressions. So these speeches they allowed the playwright to display not only the emotions and ambitions of their characters but also their extraordinary command over the language. But these writers were not simply, displaying their education, they were also experimenting with the English drama itself. So, the next important characteristic that we see is the experimentation with traditional forms. The university wits were not satisfied with simply, following the older dramatic conventions. They experimented with the structure, language, and techniques of drama and this helped give them the English stage a complete new direction. Now, another important experiment that they did was with blank verse. So this brings us to the sixth point, that is blank verse. So what exactly is a blank verse? It is an unrhymed iambic pentameter. So earlier drama it frequently depended upon rhyme, but the university wits helped establish blank verse as an effective medium for dramatic writing. So why is this useful? It is useful because it gave the dramatist much greater freedom and flexibility. The dialogue could sound more powerful and poetic without constantly having to follow a rhyme scheme. And when we later study Christopher Marlowe, we will see how powerful blank verse could become in the hands of a great dramatist. In fact, Marlowe's use of blank verse becomes so famous that Ben Jonson admired what he called as Marlowe's mighty line. We'll discuss that properly when we come to Marlowe. So next characteristic is playful wit. After all, they were called as university wits. Their dialogues frequently contains puns, wordplay, irony, witty remarks, and clever verbal exchanges. This made their plays entertaining while also displaying their intellectual command over language. And finally, we come to one of the most important characteristic of their drama, the exploration of intense human emotions. So their characters experience powerful emotions such as love, ambition, revenge, jealousy, guilt, regret, betrayal, and fear of death. And notice something here, that these are not emotions which was limited to the Elizabethan period. These are universal human emotions. Ambition can destroy a person. Jealousy can change the relationship. Revenge can consume an individual. Guilt can create enormous psychological conflict. The university wits brought these powerful emotions onto the stage, often combining them with violent incidents and dramatic situations to make their play emotionally intense and engaging. So, when we pull all the characteristics together, we can see why these writers transformed the English drama. They brought together classical learning, sophisticated language, rhetorical speeches, satire, experimentation, blank verse, wit, and intense human emotion. And now that we understand what their writings was like, it is important to meet the writers themselves. So the next question is, who were the university wits and which of them belonged to the Cambridge and which one belonged to the Oxford? So let us begin with Cambridge University. Three important names are associated with Cambridge University: Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, and Thomas Nashe. Among these, the names you should absolutely not forget is Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe is the greatest personality among the university wits. His dramatic career was remarkably short, but his contribution to English drama, particularly his use of blank verse, was extraordinary. We will study him separately in detail. Then we have Robert Greene, an important dramatist and pamphleteer. Greene became specially interesting when we discuss the relationship between university wits and Shakespeare. And the third is Thomas Nashe. He is associated with satirical prose. Next is Oxford University. Here we have another three names: John Lyly, Thomas Lodge, and George Peele. John Lyly is particularly important because his name is associated with a very distinct prose style, that is Euphuism. Thomas Lodge is remembered for his pastoral and romantic writing, while George Peele is associated with both poetry and drama. So Cambridge gives us Marlowe, Greene, Nashe, and Oxford gives us Lyly, Lodge, and Peele. So next we have another important name, Thomas Kidd. And Kidd creates an interesting situation here because unlike all the others, he did not attend either Oxford or Cambridge. Yet he is important because of his major contribution to Elizabethan drama, particularly his revenge tragedy. So for now, don't try to memorize everything. Just remember Cambridge, Marlowe, Greene, Nashe, Oxford, Lyly, Lodge, and Peele, and no university is Thomas Lodge. So we are going to discuss Christopher Marlowe. So Marlowe was an English playwright, poet, and translator of Elizabethan age. And among all the university wits, he emerged as the most prominent dramatic personality. What makes Marlowe particularly fascinating is the fact that his dramatic career was extremely short, and yet within that short period he achieved an extraordinary position in history of English drama. His major works include Tamburlaine the Great, Dr. Faustus, The Jew of Malta, Edward II. So remember these works because questions are frequently, framed around matching who is this writer or who has written this work. But Marlowe importance is that, it is not just what he wrote. What distinguishes him is his unique dramatic style. His writing is described as dynamic, energetic, and highly poetic. He possessed the remarkable ability to bring poetry and drama together. And with this, it brings us to the features that is associated with Christopher Marlowe is his use of blank verse. Remember from our previous slide, Remember from our previous slide that blank verse means unrhymed iambic pentameter. Marlowe demonstrated just how powerful and flexible blank verse could become when it is used more dramatically. So instead of sounding mechanical, his verse could express power, ambition, passion, and intense emotion. His use of blank verse became so famous that Ben Jonson also referred him to be as Marlowe's mighty lines. So that phrase is extremely important. So whenever you see mighty lines, remember Christopher Marlowe. And whenever you see Christopher Marlowe, remember blank verse. Blank verse has appeared in English drama before him. And especially in the work Gorboduc by Thomas Norton and Thomas Stackwell. But Marlowe's powerful and flexible use of blank verse created a greater dramatic expression and went on to influence other writers such as Shakespeare. Now that we have understood Christopher Marlowe as a dramatist, let us look at the major plays one by one. The first work is Tamburlaine the Great. This was Marlowe's first great dramatic success and was written in two parts. At the center of the play is Tamburlaine, who begins as a Scythian shepherd but refuses to remain within the limitation of his birth and social position. He wants to conquer and then conquer more. So his desire for power appears almost limitless. So this is where we begin to understand the typical Marlovian overreacher, a person whose desire are larger than ordinary human limitation. So remember, Tamburlaine means ambition, conquest, and power. And the play is also extremely important for Marlowe's use of blank verse. The grandeur and the energy of Tamburlaine's ambition required an equally powerful and dramatic language. And Marlowe's verse provided exactly that. Now let's move on to another work, Dr. Faustus. If Tamburlaine wanted unlimited power, Faustus wants something different. He wanted unlimited knowledge. So Faustus is highly educated scholar, but ordinary fields of knowledge no longer satisfy him. He turns towards magic and the supernatural, ultimately entering into a bargain in which his soul becomes the price of his desire. And that is what makes this Faustus such a fascinating Renaissance character. On one level, he represents the Renaissance desire for knowledge, discovery, human possibilities, and on the other level, he asks what happens when human ambitions they cross every boundary. So the tragedy therefore explores knowledge, ambition, temptation, sin, repentance, and damnation. So the next work is The Jew of Malta. Here, Marlowe creates a dark world of money, revenge, deception, political manipulation, and violence. And the central character is Barabbas, who is a wealthy merchant. And finally, the last play is Edward II. So this play is slightly, different from the other three because here Marlowe turns towards English history. So the play represents the reign of and the downfall of King Edward II, and he examines a question of kingship, political authority, rebellion, favoritism, and personal relationships. So it is particularly important because it shows Marlowe developing a more politically and psychologically focused from a historical drama. And this becomes significant when we later think about the developments of the history plays in Shakespeare. Next up, we have Robert Greene. Robert Greene was an Elizabethan playwright, poet, prose writer, and pamphleteer. He is important because he was not only a dramatist but also a significant prose writer and a critic of contemporary society. Greene was educated at St. John's College, Cambridge, and later received a MA from Clare Hall, Cambridge. Because of his university education and his involvement in Elizabethan literary culture, he is counted among the University Wits, along with writers such as Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Nashe, Lodge, George Peele. So Greene was a prolific writer, meaning that he produced a large body of work in different forms. He wrote plays, romances, poetry, pamphlets, prose works. So his writing is known for combining romance, humor, satire, moral reflections, and criticism of contemporary society. His works, it often contains elements of love, adventure, fantasy, magic, comedy, and moral conflicts. Greene is particularly important in the early development of Elizabethan comedy and romantic drama. He helped English drama move towards more sophisticated plots involving romance, adventure, love, heroic themes. So, one of his best known work is Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay, which combines romance, magic, love, patriotism, and tragedy. It is an important example of Greene's romantic drama. Greene is also remembered for his pamphlets, through which he commented on the society of this time. So his prose writings, it provides a glimpse into the Elizabethan urban life, the poverty, the crime, the gambling, the prostitution, social corruption, the moral problems of contemporary society. So, however, Greene is especially famous today because of his controversial connection with William Shakespeare. In his pamphlet, a Groatsworth of Wit bought with a million of repentance, Greene appears to attack Shakespeare. So he famously refers to Shakespeare as an upstart crow beautified with our feathers. He also uses the expression of Johannes factum, meaning roughly a jack of all trades, suggesting that Shakespeare was entering the literary world and competing with the university educated writers. Therefore, Robert Greene is important in English literature history for three main reasons. First, that he was among the important university wits. Second, that he contributed to the development of Elizabethan romantic drama and comedy also. And the third one is that it's Groatsworth of Wit. It contains one of the earliest contemporary reference of Shakespeare, and it gives us a famous phrase, "upstart crow." So let us now look at the major works of Robert Greene. These works are important because they show the different genres in which Greene wrote and also established his connection with the development of Elizabethan drama and with Shakespeare. The first important work is The Honorable History of Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay, which is commonly called as Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay. So it is a romantic drama that is considered as one of the Green's most important plays. The play is based loosely on the legendary figure of Friar Roger Bacon, the famous medieval scholar and musician. So the play combines several elements including magic, love, ambition, patriotism, and tragedy. Friar Bacon is presented as a powerful scholar and a musician who seeks supernatural knowledge and power. So, alongside this story, the play develops a love story involving Edward and Margaret. Therefore, the play is a good example of Greene's romantic and spectacular style of drama. Next up, we have James the Fourth. It is a romantic drama or romantic comedy with a historical setting. The play is set largely in Scotland and deals with the theme of love, disguise, political intrigue, and romance. The central figure is King James the Fourth. So, like many of Greene's play, it combines realistic and romantic elements with dramatic spectacle. The third one is A Looking Glass for London and England. So Greene wrote this work in collaboration with Thomas Lodge. So the play is important because it combines elements of medieval morality play along with emerging style of Elizabethan drama. It draws upon the biblical story of Johann and Nineveh, Nineveh. Okay, so the play deals with the themes such as sin, punishment, repentance, and redemption. The idea of a looking glass suggests that the event of the play are meant to act as a mirror of the English society, showing people the consequences of sinful behavior. The fourth one is Pandosto, the triumph of time. So, this is an important work because, unlike the previous works, it is not a play. It is a prose romance that was first published in 1588. So the story involves love, jealousy, separation, exile, and eventful reconciliation. Its greatest importance for students of English literature is its connection with William Shakespeare. Shakespeare used Greene's Pandosto as an important source for his play The Winter's Tale. The final work is Greene's Groatsworth of Wit, bought with a million of repentance. This is a prose pamphlet that was published in 1592, shortly before Greene's death. So it is especially famous because of its connection with William Shakespeare, as you already know. In this pamphlet, Greene appears to criticize a young actor playwright who is generally identified as Shakespeare. So he famously described him as an upstart crow beautified with her feathers. So Greene also refers to him as Johann's factotum, which I've already told you. So this expression means that jack of all trades. So, and suggests that Greene's criticism of Shakespeare for entering the literary and theatrical world and competing with the university educated writers. Now, let us move on to the third important Cambridge writer, that is Thomas Nashe. Thomas Nashe was an important satirist, pamphleteer, prose writer, and a dramatist of the Elizabethan period. Like Robert Greene, Nashe was also educated in Cambridge, especially at St. John's College. Nashe is particularly important for the development of English prose. His prose is energetic, fast moving, witty, argumentative, and often deliberately proactive. He uses puns, word plays, irony, exaggeration, humor to attack the weakness that he sees around him. And what does he attack? Almost everything that he considers foolish or corrupt, like social hypocrisy, literary pretensions, corruption, foolish behavior, intellectual dishonesty. Let's take a look at his major works. One of his most important work is Pierre's Penniless, his supplicant to the devil. The title itself should tell us something about Nashe's style, that it is a satirical pamphlet in which the speaker, Pierre's Penniless, complains about his condition and society around him. Another extremely important work is The Unfortunate Traveler. So, this work is often described as the first picaresque novel in English. Now, what do you understand by picaresque? A picaresque narrative typically follows the adventure of a rogue or socially marginal character who moves through the different places and encounters different sections of society. So, Unfortunate Traveler is important not only for Nashe but also for the development of English prose fiction. We have Summer's Last Will and Testament, which is a dramatic work combining entertainment with satire and social commentary. Next work is The Terrors of Night. It is a prose work on dreams and supernatural fears. The last one is Dido, Queen of Carthage. So, this drama is associated with Christopher Marlowe. So, this play is associated with both Nashe and Christopher Marlowe. Now, we move from Cambridge to Oxford University, beginning with the writer who is completely different from the style of Marlowe and Nashe. And the famous person is John Lyly. John Lyly was an Elizabethan prose writer and dramatist who studied at Magdalen College, Oxford. He became famous particularly for his prose style, which came to be known as Euphuism. So, what exactly is Euphuism? Euphuism is an extremely ornate and artificial prose style. So Lyly's sentences are carefully balanced and highly patterned. He makes extensive use of antithesis, alliteration, similes, parallel structures, and classical references. In simple words, his prose is not plain and controversial. It is actually deliberately uses decorative, balanced, elaborate, and rhetorical style. And the name Euphuism itself comes from Lyly's most famous prose work, that is, Euphues, the Anatomy of Wit, which was published in 1578. So, the central importance of this work is that it established the distinctive prose style called as Euphuism. Next up, we have Euphues and His England. So, this is the sequel to Euphues, the Anatomy of Wit. So while Euphues introduces the character Euphues and explores the question of conduct and morality, Euphues and His England continues these discussion in the context of English society and courtly life. But Lyly was not only a prose writer. He was also an important Elizabethan dramatist, particularly known for his courtly comedies. So the next work is Endymion. Endymion is one of Lyly's best known courtly comedies. It is based on the Greek myth of Endymion. Okay, so in Greek mythology, Endymion is a beautiful young man loved by the moon goddess Selena. So Lyly takes this classical myth and transforms it into a sophisticated courtly entertainment. So the play combines classical mythology, love, allegory, courtly themes, fantasy. So the play is often interpreted allegorically, and its courtly context is important for understanding Elizabethan court drama. The fourth work is Campast. So this is another important work, and it is a comedy which is by John Lyly. So it draws upon classical history and mythology. The central story involves Alexander the Great and the philosopher Apelles and Campast, a beautiful woman. So the play explores the theme of love, art, power, and beauty. So it is another example of Lyly's courtly comedy, characterized by elegant language, wit, and classical subject matter. Next up, we have Thomas Lodge. Thomas Lodge is another important writer associated with Elizabethan period and University Wits. Thomas Lodge was an Elizabethan poet, dramatist, and prose writer. His works show the strong influence of the Renaissance, particularly its interest in classical literature, romance, pastoral life, adventure, and human experience. Lodge was educated at Trinity College, Oxford. Like several other writers of his generation, he received a university education and became part of the flourishing literary culture of Elizabethan England. His literary career reflects the Renaissance fascination with classical themes, pastoral setting, romance, and adventure. So, pastoral and romance. So, Lodge is particularly, remembered for pastoral and romantic prose. Remember this. And when we talk about pastoral literature, it generally presents an idealized picture of rural or country life, often involving shepherds, lovers, nature, and simpler way of living. So Lodge combines these pastoral elements with romance, adventure, love, and fantasy. His prose, therefore, presents an important stage in the development of Elizabethan prose romance. So Lodge and Robert Greene, they remember this name because they have collaborated with the work called as A Looking Glass for London and England. So the play combines elements of morality play, biblical narrative, romance, and Elizabethan drama. So let's look at the major works by Thomas Lodge. The first work is Rosalind, Euphues' Golden Legacy. So this is important work, and you should keep in mind that it is very important as a prose romance. It's a pastoral romance, meaning that it combines the theme of romance and love with an idealized rural or pastoral setting. The story includes several important themes such as love, exile, disguise, adventure, reconciliation, and the work is especially important because in the later on we'll see that it becomes a major source for Shakespeare's As You Like It. Okay, the next work is A Looking Glass for London and England. So, this work, as you already know, it was written in collaboration with Robert Greene. It is important because it brings together several different traditions. So, the play combines biblical material, morality, play elements, romance, dramatic elements, and the central biblical material is connected with Johann and Nineveh, Nineveh. Okay, remember this name. So the play explores idea of sin, punishment, repentance, and redemption. The third work is Schelius Metamorphosis. So the third work is Schelius Metamorphosis. So this is a narrative poem which is based on classical mythology. The title refers to the mythological figure Scylla. The poem reflects the Renaissance fascination with classical myth and transformations. So, while Rosalind represents Lodge's contribution to pastoral prose romance, Schylus Metamorphosis represents his interest in classical mythology and poetry. Now, Let us come to George Peele, another important writer associated with University Wits and the development of Elizabethan drama. George Peele was an Elizabethan poet and playwright. He is generally associated with Oxford University Wits, a group of educated Elizabethan writers who contributed significantly to the development of English drama. So Peele was educated at Christ Church, Oxford. His university education exposed him to a classical literature, mythology, rhetoric, and poetry, all of which influenced his later dramatic writing. George Peele is particularly known for his poetic language and lyrical quality. Unlike the dramatist who focused mainly on action and plot, Peele often gave great importance to the beauty of language. His dramatic works contains elaborate description, songs, poetic imagery, and ornamental language. He is also associated with pastoral elements. His work frequently makes use of nature, rural settings, shepherds, love, idealized landscape. So, this is another feature of Peele's writing that he uses elaborate pageantry. Now, what is pageantry? Pageantry refers to a spectacular public display, ceremony, costumes, music, visual effects, processions, and elaborate staging. So, Peele was particularly skilled at creating this kind of visual and ceremonial spectacle in his works. So, therefore, he sometimes remembered as the master of pageantry. So, his works often combines romance, mythology, history, spectacle. Okay, so keep this in mind. And Peele helped expand drama beyond simply just telling a story. He contributed to the poetic, decorative, lyrical, and spectacular dimension of Elizabethan stage. So, when you study George Peele, we should always remember that he was a poet of elaborate language and spectacle. Now, let's look at the major works by George Peele. The first work is The Arraignment of Paris. So it is a pastoral and mythological drama. The play is based on the famous Greek myth of Judgment of Paris. So in this myth, Paris is asked to judge which of three goddesses, Juno, Pallas Athena, or Venus, is the fairest one. So Peele transforms this classical material into a form of Elizabethan courtly entertainment. So this play combines classical mythology, pastoral elements, music, songs, courtly entertainment, spectacles. So therefore, this arrangement of Paris is an excellent example of Peele's interest in mythology, then poetry, pageantry. Okay. The next work is Edward the First. So, this is the second important work that you need to keep in mind. Its full title is The Famous Chronicle of King Edward the First. It's a chronicle or history play that deals with the reign of Edward I of England. So, Peele uses historical material but does not present history in a completely documentary manner. He combines historical elements with romance, dramatic conflicts, and theatrical spectacle. So, this shows how Elizabethan dramatists often transformed the historical material into a more exciting stage entertainment. The next work is The Old Wives' Tale. This is a playful romantic comedy and is one of Peele's most entertaining works. This play contains storytelling, magic, adventure, romance, fantasy, theatrical illusion. It's a playful and a self conscious quality, and it also reflects Peele's interest and in more popular entertainment and romance. So the title itself suggests the tradition of stories that was told by ordinary people or old wives. So the play is therefore different in tone from serious historical or biblical drama. It demonstrates Peele's ability to use fantasy, comedy, popular storytelling, and theatrical spectacle. The next work is David and Bathsheba. So this is another important work that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so this is a biblical drama that is based on the story of King David and Bathsheba from the Old Testament. So this play deals with the theme of desire, love, sin, power, moral conflict, emotional suffering. So Peele's poetic and lyrical language is particularly noticeable in this particular play. The story, it provides Peele with an opportunity to explore the intense emotional and psychological situation, especially David's desire for Bathsheba and the consequences that will follow. So, thus, David and Bathsheba is especially important for its poetic language and emotional intensity. So now that we are done with the three Oxford University wits, that is John Lyly, Thomas Lodge, George Peele, we are now going to talk about Thomas Kidd. Thomas Kidd was an Elizabethan dramatist who is often associated with university wits. However, there is one important distinction. Unlike most of the writers who were traditionally grouped with the university wits, like uh, Cambridge University or belonging to the Oxford University, Kidd did not attend either of the colleges. So, this is a very important thing that you need to keep in mind. Kidd is known as the father of English revenge tragedy. So, Thomas Kidd's greatest contribution to English drama was the development and popularization of English revenge tragedy. So, because of this contribution, he is often called as the father of English revenge tragedy. Okay, his famous work is the Spanish tragedy, which became one of the most influential revenge tragedies of the Elizabethan period. Now, what is revenge tragedy? A revenge tragedy is a type of tragedy in which the central action revolves around the desire to avenge a wrong, murder, or injustice. It will contain revenge, murder, madness, intrigue, violence, ghost or supernatural elements, bloodshed, death and destructions. So Kidd, he helped establish many of these conventions on the English stage. His dramatic world is therefore very different from the lighter romantic drama that was written by writers such as John Lyly. So his plays focus more heavily on violence, psychological suffering, revenge, and death. So Kidd's dramatic technique is also very influential. We can see that his influence can be particularly seen in works of William Shakespeare as well. For example, Shakespeare's Hamlet, it contains several features that were associated with revenge tragedy tradition. There were ghost, murder, revenge, delay, madness, death. So Kidd's famous work, The Spanish Tragedy, helped establish the dramatic pattern for Shakespeare's Hamlet. Now, let us look at the masterpiece, The Spanish Tragedy. I'll give you a brief what is there in this work. So, as I told you, it is Kidd's masterpiece, and this is one of the most influential revenge tragedies of Elizabethan period. It played a major role in establishing the conventions of English revenge tragedy. The central character of this play is Hieronymo, who is a knight marshal of Spain. So the tragedy begins with the murder of Hieronymo's son, Horatio. So Horatio is murdered by Lorenzo and Balthazar. So Hieronymo wants to obtain justice for his son, but he finds that the legal and political system are unable to give him satisfactory justice. So, as a result, his desire for justice gradually turns into a desire for personal revenge. So, this is the central conflict of the play, justice versus revenge. So, Hieronymo begins by seeking lawful justice, but when that fails, he takes revenge into his own hand. So this is again another feature that you will see in this play is that the play contains many of the characteristics elements of revenge tragedy. First, there is a ghost, the ghost of Andrea, who appears and together with revenge observes the event of the play. The supernatural elements, it creates an atmosphere of death and impending vengeance. The second thing that you will see is madness. So Hieronymo experiences intense psychological suffering following the murder of his son. His apparent madness also becomes connected with his plan for the revenge. The third thing, of course, that you'll be seeing is revenge. So the entire action of the play ultimately revolves around Hieronymo's determination to avenge Horatio's murder. Fourth thing that you'll see is play within a play. So Hieronymo, he stages a play called as Soliman and Persida. He uses this performance as a means of taking revenge on those who were responsible for his son's death. So this is an extremely important dramatic technique because the play becomes a trap for the characters who have wronged Hieronymo. So finally, the play contains a considerable violence and death, which are characteristic features of Elizabethan revenge tragedy. So the central theme is that the Spanish tragedy explores the difficult relationship between justice and personal vengeance. Now, let's talk about the relationship between university wits and Shakespeare. The University Wits played a very important role in the development of English drama before Shakespeare reached his full dramatic maturity. It is important to understand that Shakespeare did not develop English drama completely on its own. He inherited a dramatic tradition that had already been enriched and transformed by earlier Elizabethan writers. So the University Wits, they helped create the literary and theatrical environment in which Shakespeare later developed his extraordinary dramatic art. Now, let's revise who are the university wits. They were the group of people who were educated in either Oxford or Cambridge University, and they were the writers who contributed significantly to the English literature and drama. Writers such as Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, Thomas Nashe, then who else? Thomas Lodge, George Peele, John Lyly. So these are the writers who were associated. And if I have to ask you, who among this did not go to any of the college? It is Kidd, isn't it? Thomas Kidd. So let me tell you about the contributions of the university wits. So first thing is that they elevated the English drama. So before the university wits, English drama was often dominated by morality plays, interludes, and relatively simple dramatic forms. So the university wits helped transform drama into a more sophisticated form of literary and theatrical art. So they introduced more elaborate plots, strong characters, richer language, and greater dramatic complexity. Another is they strengthen the blank verse. So, this is one of the great contributions, that is blank verse. So, what is blank verse? Unrhymed iambic pentameter. And Christopher Marlowe was particularly important in developing the powerful use of blank verse. So, Marlowe's dramatic verse is often called as mighty lines. So, this development had an enormous influence on Shakespeare, who later made blank verse one of the principal instruments of English drama. The third is they developed memorable dramatic characters. So the university wits, they created larger than life and psychologically interesting characters. Like Marlowe created Dr. Faustus, Tamburlaine, Kidd is famous for creating a character, Hieronymo. Green has created Friar Bacon. So these characters are driven by powerful desires such as ambition, revenge, love, power, politics, knowledge. Okay. Next up, we have the expanded dramatic themes. So, dramatic themes like ambition, as I already told you, revenge, love, power, politics, knowledge. So, Marlowe, if we see, his characters were driven by ambition and unlimited power. If we talk about Kid, his characters was having a lot of revenge and talked about justice. Green, his themes were mostly on love, magic, romance, ambition. When we talk about Lyly, then his works contained love and courtly behaviors. Okay, so these themes, they later became central to Shakespearean drama as well. The fifth point is that they increase the rhetorical and poetic power. So the university bits, they brought greater rhetorical sophistication and poetic richness to the English stage. Their drama became more poetic, more imaginative, humorous, rhetorical, and emotionally intense. They demonstrated that drama could be both theatrically important, entertaining, and poetically powerful as well. The sixth point is that they experimented with different genres like history, tragedy, comedy, romance, mythology, pastoral drama, revenge tragedies. Okay, so this experimentation, it expanded the possibilities of English drama. Shakespeare also later brought many of these different traditions together in his own works. Now, let's talk about the significance of university wits. The importance can be understood through major developments that happened during this time. The first thing is the transformation of English drama. So, the university wits helped English drama move from medieval drama to Renaissance drama. Medieval drama was largely associated with religious subjects, morality plays, mystery plays, and didactic purposes. And the university wits, they introduced a drama that was more concerned with human ambition, love, revenge, power, knowledge, politics, and individual experiences. Thus, drama became more secular, literary, sophisticated, and theatrical. The next point is professionalize the English drama. So the university wits, they helped move drama towards a more professional form of literary and theatrical production. So drama was no longer simply an extension of just religious or community performances. It increasingly became more professionally written, performed, designed for the public theater, intended for the popular entertainment. It became more sophisticated in structure and language. So this development, it contributed to the emergence of Elizabethan commercial theater. The third point is elevated dramatic language. This is another important contribution, the elevation of dramatic language. So the university wits, they introduced greater poetic power, rhetoric, wit, imagery, verbal sophistication, and drama became something that audience could hear and appreciate as poetry, not merely just watch as a story that was being acted. So this is particularly evident in the works of Christopher Marlowe as well, whose dramatic verse gave English tragedy extraordinary poetic force. The fourth point is strengthen blank verse. So, blank verse, as you already know, is unrhymed iambic pentameter. Okay, so Christopher Marlowe was particularly important in this development. His powerful dramatic verse is famously associated with the expression of mighty lines. So, Marlowe demonstrated that blank verse also could express ambition, passion, conflict, heroic aspiration, and intense emotion. So Shakespeare also later on developed this blank verse into one of the greatest instrument of English dramatic expression. Next up, we have it created stronger characters. So, one of the major achievements of University Wits was the creation of stronger and a more individualized dramatic characters. Earlier drama, it often presented characters that were mainly as types, especially in morality plays. For example, characters who were representing abstract qualities such as good, evil, pride, greed. But the university wits increasingly created character with individual desires, ambitions, passion, conflict, weaknesses. So the characters became more individualized, ambitious, passionate, psychologically complex. For example, if we see Dr. Faustus, he was driven by enormous desire for knowledge. If we talk about Hieronimo, so kids Hieronimo, in Spanish tragedy is consumed by grief and revenge. So, this development also prepared the way for Shakespeare's much more complex characters. Next up, we have expanded dramatic themes. So, the university which also greatly expanded the range of subjects that English drama could explore. Their major themes included ambition, revenge, politics, knowledge, morality, which we can see. Next up, we have broadened dramatic forms. So they contributed to tragedy, comedy, history, romance, pastoral drama, biblical drama. So this experimentation was extremely important because it expanded the possibilities of English theatre. So this variety created a rich dramatic tradition that Shakespeare could later on inherit and also develop. Next up, we have prepared the ground for Shakespeare. So it is perhaps the most important significance of University Wits that he prepared the ground for Shakespeare. So Shakespeare entered a theatrical world that was already developing. So the University Wits had already contributed to powerful dramatic language, blank verse, strong individual characters, complex themes, different dramatic genres, professional theaters. So Shakespeare inherited this developing tradition and transformed it to a much higher artistic level. He did not just simply imitate the university wits, of course. He absorbed their achievements, developed their techniques, and combined them with his own extraordinary dramatic and poetic abilities. Now, before we move forward, let's have a quick revision. So the first writer is Christopher Marlowe. He belonged to Cambridge. He's famous for blank verse, and his most important work is Dr. Faustus. Along with that, we also have Tamburlaine, right? Robert Greene also belonged to Cambridge University, and he is famous for romance, prose writing, controversial connections with Shakespeare, and one of his important prose romance that is Pandosto, The Triumph of Time. So it became a source for Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. Remember this, okay? Next up, we have Thomas Nashe, who belonged to Cambridge University. And Nashe is particularly associated with satire and prose writing. His best famous work is The Unfortunate traveler. Next up, we have John Lyly, who belonged to Oxford University, and he is famous for his prose style, which is called as Euphuism. He's also particularly associated with courtly comedy. One of his famous work that you should keep in mind is Euphues, okay, the Anatomy of Wit. Next up, we have Thomas Lodge, who belongs to Oxford University. So, Lodge is particularly remembered for pastoral romance and prose fiction. His famous romance is Rosalind, Euphues' golden legacy. So, this work is also important because it became a source of Shakespeare's As You Like It. Huh? Next up, we have George Peele, who is also belonging to the Oxford University, especially Christchurch. Okay, so he is known for his poetic language, pageantry, romance, and spectacle. His famous work is The Old Wives' Tale. The last one we have Thomas Kidd. He did not attend either of Oxford or Cambridge University. Nevertheless, he is associated with University Wits because of his important contribution to the Elizabethan drama. His best work is The Spanish Tragedy, which is a revenge tragedy. So, with that, we end our discussion on University Wits. I hope this lecture helped you understand not only who the University Wits were, but also why they occupy such an important place in the development of Elizabethan drama. We looked at their major works, who are the major writers, what are the important works, their distinctive literary contribution, and most important thing, their role in preparing the ground for extraordinary development of English drama in the age of Shakespeare. So that's all for today's lecture. In the next session, we are going to talk about another important topic from the history of English literature.